So we were about to start recording, and then Mike held up a fun-looking device in front of the camera and said, "Do you want to talk about this now, or do you want to record first?" And I said, "We should record first because I want to know thoughts on this, and I want the public to know his thoughts on this because this is an unnecessary purchase that most people probably won't make, but it looks really fun." So what is this, Mike, and why?
Yes. So it is an e-ink Android tablet. It is kind of like a Remarkable Plus Plus. The exact model of it is the Onyx Books Tab Ultra. So terrible name.
Yep, I would
Uh,
agree with that.
it is more expensive than anyone should spend on an e-ink tablet. I absolutely love it, however. So
Okay.
the genesis of this, I've been using my Remarkable a lot with the day job. I think we talked about that on this podcast.
Yep, a
I
little bit.
really like it. I put together a PDF planning template that we sold alongside the focused New Year calendar. So people who bought the calendar got a PDF planning template. And I've been using that on the Remarkable. And when you actually have it on the Remarkable, it's great. However, the Remarkable does not allow templates. So that means that you have to upload a PDF. And you have two choices basically because you can't use a template. You could have a different, like upload a new document every time you want to fill it out. You could copy and paste and make one giant PDF that's 365 pages long and fill it out day by day.
Sounds frustrating.
It was insanely frustrating. What I wanted was a template. And so that got me thinking, is there any other devices that could allow me to do this? Kind of like the Remarkable, but I could use templates. And then a friend of mine sent me a picture of his Onyx Books Note Air 2 Plus. So it's like the top of the line Onyx Books device prior to this one coming out. And he sent me a screenshot of him using Obsidian on it. And I was like, oh boy.
Yep.
Because now I can do my journaling at night on an e-ink tablet potentially. And I'm finding a million more use cases for this and a million more justifications for spending way too much money on this thing. So I did a thing and I found a open box, which was less than the retail with a whole bunch of extra stuff. But it was a little bit more than the older one, the Note Air 2 Plus that I mentioned. So I bought it and I love this thing. It's exactly what I envisioned. It gives me the ability to do templates. It's great for taking analog notes. I've got a screen protector thing on it, kind of like the Paperlike, which makes it more like the Remarkable. And then it is exactly like it says on the tin, an e-ink Android tablet. And when I tell people I have an e-ink Android tablet, their reaction is one of two things. It's like, who in the world needs one of those? Or I can't believe Schmidt's got an Android device.
And I'm
But
probably a little bit of both of those mixed in together. Like,
sure.
okay, why? Android? What are you thinking? Come on. Like,
Yep.
these are all the thoughts that go through my brain. But it's Mike.
Well, I've never owned an Android device before, so I can't compare it to like a stock Android device. But my understanding is that it is not stock Android. It is kind of like the Books version, but it does have the Google Play Store on it. So it comes preloaded with a bunch of tools, including the Notes tool. So that Notes tool, I'm sure, is way more feature rich than anything else that you would just find on an Android device. There's different layers, there's different tools, there's OCR, all that kind of stuff like built into it. You can tap a button, export all the text that you've written as text that you could send in an email, copy paste to something else, which was another thing with the Remarkable. In order to export those notes, you had to send yourself an email. I don't want to send myself an email. So yeah, I love this thing. The battery on it, I think I've charged it once in like the week and a half that I've had it. So it lasts quite a bit. It has two different light adjustments, one for blue light and one for, which they call night, and then one for warm light, which they call day. It doesn't make any sense, but basically it's like the orangish light and then the bluish light. So I turn the blue light all the way down, and it has the ability, kind of like Scribble, where you can right on the iPad itself, and it converts your
Yep.
handwritten text into actual text, but it does it in a box at the bottom. I don't know. There's a bunch of things that I actually like better about iOS on this thing. It's not, I mean, it has the ability supposedly to like watch videos and things. Like it has a high refresh rate mode, but there's no way I'm actually going to do that. It just, yeah. It's more than enough to run Obsidian. One of the things I really like about this, by the way, is you know how in iOS you have all the different apps that are open, and iOS decides what you should leave open and what you want to, what you should close.
It's like trying to be smart about what's continuing to run in the background.
But it's stupid and it never works. So with this one, you can actually lock something. So it's perfect because Obsidian takes a long time to open, probably because my vault is 35,000 files and I'm syncing everything using Obsidian
That's
Sync.
what it is. Not too long ago I switched my it's the Bible thing that completely wrecks it in this case because it's a note for every verse, right?
Yep,
and
exactly.
I have not historically used your method of a verse per note and have gone with like the chapter per note. And I don't, maybe a month ago or so I switched it over to the verse version for other reasons. And my vault got significantly slower and borderline impossible to use for about a day until it got caught up. It's like, okay, now it's synced across. Now we can quit with all this nonsense. And now we can continue working on things. And Blake has the perfect way to explain this.
He does,
it's a vault.
He does.
This is a vault of biblical proportions. This is amazing.
Literally.
I love this.
Yeah. So you're right. So basically, even the iOS devices have trouble keeping up with a vault that big. The computer has no problems, but the iOS devices definitely do. So this is a problem only when you actually open the app, though. So by being able to lock it and say, never close this app, I never have to deal with that.
Nice. So it just syncs constantly in the background.
Yes. I mean, probably, but it's tiny little text files, so it's not a whole bunch of data.
Sure.
In reality, when I am opening this to use it, it's at the end of the day and I'm planning my day using that pad. And then I am going through and I am completing all of my journaling in Obsidian on an e-ink device now, instead of staring at my phone or just not doing it. That was like a point of friction. Is like, I don't want to use my phone for this. Obsidian's terrible on the phone anyways.
Really, the only thing I use Obsidian on the phone for is whenever I'm like taking book notes or something. If that's not in the book itself, I'll do it there. Or if I'm like making a list of some sort or capturing a quote, something along those lines. That's usually what I'm doing. So it's not like any heavy lifting at all.
Yeah, so I love it. I love doing the filling out my journaling that way. It doesn't do all of the stuff, obviously, that like the main Obsidian does on the computer. You don't have the canvas and stuff like that, but it's more than enough for what I want to use it for. And it is just hitting the sweet spot in my productivity workflows, I guess. It's helping me to not have to go back to the devices. I think we'll talk about this more next time in the next book, but I've been rethinking all of like the analog digital stuff and what jobs am I hiring my devices to do and not touching them except for that intentionally, trying to stay away from things unless I have a reason for going there. And I absolutely love this thing. I'm going to do a video on it at some point. I have the keyboard case coming today.
So you are all in on this thing. I see how this is going. Yep. Slippery slope. That's what I'm seeing. Yep.
But if you're looking for like a tablet, this isn't the thing to get. The iPad is so much better in so many ways. But for what I wanted this device to be, it's perfect for me. It's great. Can't say enough good things about it. And I now own an Android device. So there you go.
It's a number of years ago now, maybe 4 or 5. Is that a number of years? 4 or 5 years ago, I purchased my first Samsung. It was a refrigerator. So I texted like some of my families, like, I finally broke down and bought a Samsung. And I think it was my mom, maybe one of my sisters. I don't know. Somebody made the comment like, are you okay? Like, do I need to get you to a hospital? Like, that was the comment that was made. It's like, no, it's just a refrigerator. Works out great.
Yeah, I don't think I'd get so one thing I'm noticing with Android and really anything non-Apple that has a computer system in it is that a lot of people like to force updates. And I don't think I would want a forced update to my refrigerator. That's what I'd be worried about with a Samsung.
Yes.
They're going to brick my refrigerator during an update in the middle of the night. I'm going to come down and everything's going to be warm and ruined.
Yeah. To be fair, I am not like that refrigerator. It was at our old house. That refrigerator it didn't even have an ice it didn't even have like a water thing in it, whatever you call that. So it was completely stainless across the front. There was no screen, you couldn't even get ice out of the front of it. You had to open it and pull the tray out. Like that's how lame, I guess, of a refrigerator that was. Like it's old school. Like just keep food cold and freeze some of it. Like that's all you have to do.
Yeah,
maybe
one
give me
job.
some ice once in a while. Like this, you have very, very few tasks you need to accomplish here, and showing me pictures of my kids from 3 years ago is not a task I want my refrigerator to fulfill. So just keep food cold, please. Like that's all I needed from it. So it did not give me updates. I did not expect it to give me updates. I don't know why you need that stuff on a refrigerator. Anyway, all of that aside, we should do some follow-up because...
Can I do one more thing real quick? Since we were talking about journaling, I have to mention this. Otherwise, I am terrible at self-promotion. I made a thing.
Okay.
I updated my journaling bootcamp course, and I added a few lessons to it. I moved it over to Circle, so it's part of the faith-based productivity community thing. And it's a separate thing, so you have to buy it. It's $27 as we record this. The price is actually going to go up shortly, but I am also working on a digital journaling and Obsidian course. So I recognize that not everybody who journals wants to go hardcore like I did with Obsidian, and I split those two. But I'm going to give the digital journaling in Obsidian course when it's ready to everybody who buys the journaling bootcamp. So if you're listening to this, the price will be probably higher at that point. It'll be $37, but you can get the journaling bootcamp course plus the Obsidian one when it comes out. And I've got it all outlined. I'm going to record it. My goal is to get it out in the next couple of weeks. But there you go. Now, exit soapbox. Let's talk about the book.
Okay. Well, let's not yet because I took the leadership evaluation from 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And I assume you did this. This seems like a simple enough thing you would have pulled off. Yep. So I did this, and I made a list of like what my score was for each of the laws, and then you can like categorize them based on strength areas, growth areas, or weakness areas. And then I totaled up how many I had in each of those, and I really wish I had not done that. Did you do that part? Or was that like an extra thing?
I did all the tallying. So I have my scores for all 21 areas, and there's 2 specifically that targeted for me to work on. And then I did the average. I didn't do anything outside of that. Is that what you're asking?
Well,
or
I
take it deeper.
So I did the totals on the scores themselves and like what you're saying, the averages and such. But I did a little bit of looking online, and there's a way that he has started to, like, if you score between, 1 and 4, it's a weakness area. If it's between 5 and 7, it's the growth area, and then an 8 or a 9 is a strength area. And then I tallied up how many I had in each of those categories, which is not a fun number to get because I'm betting most of us have a lot in that weakness area. At least I did. And it was not fun to look through like, oh, these are, so more than half of these are in the weakness area. Not what I wanted to
so
see.
You did the same approach as me, but I think maybe you were a little bit harder on yourself than I was.
I think so, which is good. It's good for me to see like, okay, this is the work I need to go do. And I have not formally put together a list of things I need to work on here because I'm a little bit leery of doing too many things at one time. Like we've talked about this regularly. Like if you attempt to adjust too many things in your life concurrently, you can end up failing at all of them at one time. Work on one of them and you have more of a chance of success in that. And that's what I'm a little bit leery of. So I'm kind of sticking with Right now, I've got one other action item here on the list for follow-up, which was to intentionally connect with my volunteers on Sundays. Because of timing of when we're recording these, we've only had one Sunday since we recorded last. I did that on Sunday, which was good, and it's obvious it's only 1 week, so nobody's really going to notice that it's any different, and it's not like anyone's in my brain, so they don't see that I connected with everybody. They just saw that I connected with them. And my hope is like that's the beginning of a habit that then has better effects long term, I guess. Trying to build those relationships with those volunteers. Now the question is like, do I add to that based on the results of this leadership evaluation? If I was a go-getter who was ready to like take on the world, probably, but I know that that's just a glutton for punishment in my case, so that's a bad idea. So I think over the next week or two, I need to figure out what comes next and start working on it. And that should become a perpetual cycle on my part. So not anything formal to add to that list, but going to continue down that path.
Cool. I also took the assessment. You want me to chime in here before you get to the other one? Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I took the assessment. I have been passionate about leadership for a very long time, and the framing of the questions doesn't give a whole lot of room. I don't know. I feel like there should have been a larger range, because 0 was never, 1 was rarely, 2 was sometimes, and 3 was always. So I think I gave myself a lot of 2s where maybe you gave yourself 1s.
It's fair.
And that caused most of my scores to be in the 8 through 10 range. But there were 2 that were lower than that, Law 10 and Law 11, which I don't have it in front of me what specifically those 2 were.
Influence and inner circle.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, but the big thing for me from taking that assessment was the questions that were asked. There were specific ones that just kind of highlighted recent events at the day job and like, oh, I did a good job in this scenario, or I could have actually done this a little bit differently. But I did tend to give myself the benefit of the doubt with the sometimes. That should be right in the middle, but it skews towards the high end. So,
yeah. Yes.
At least do a 5-point scale. Come on.
I know, right? That'd make it a little bit easier. So good job on taking the evaluation. What were your other 2?
Come up with a list of things that people in my inner circle must have. So this is probably related to the lower score there. I had some work to do in that area. And I did come up with a couple of things. I realized in doing this, by the way, that there are different levels, I think, to the inner circle for me. Because there are certain people that I will allow to speak into my life in certain areas. So I think like there are certain criteria people have to meet in terms of, I'm going to listen to you as you talk about a thing because you've had success in this particular area. And true inner circle is like my personal confidants, only a couple of people who are really, really close to me, right? So I can share some of these just to give people examples, I guess, if they're thinking about building their own inner circle. I came up with 4 things, and there's probably more if I spend more time on this, but these are the ones that are really important to me. Got to have a growth mindset. You have to constantly be trying to grow and maximize your potential. Not do all the things, but not stay where you are. Number 2 is a commitment to excellence. So if we're going to work together on anything, I need to know that you are not going to mail it in. I'm not going to have to quality check your work. I can rest assured that when I let you do this thing in this project, you're going to come back with something that is really great. Number 3, and this is where I think there are different versions of this, but for me personally, if you're going to be true inner circle, I would say that you have to be spiritually serious. And so that disqualifies certain people who I do open myself up to in certain areas. But I was thinking back to like the minus to the plus ratings that I did so long ago. The people who were truly plus. There were only 2 of them. One was my wife and one was my pastor. And these are people who at any point, no matter what the situation, I will listen to what they have to say. So maybe that's unfair. Maybe that's not what inner circle really means, but that's kind of how I defined it for this exercise as I was thinking through these things. There are a lot of people who would be in like the next tier below that. I shouldn't say a lot of people, but it gets significantly larger, maybe 3 times as many people, 4 times as many people. And then the last one, self-starter, self-motivator. I had trouble labeling this one, but basically, if you know what to do, you're going to just go take care of it. You're going to do it. Doesn't mean you have to do it perfect. Doesn't mean you can't ever miss. Doesn't mean that you have to confess that you're perfect. I think that's a lot of the problem with the productivity space, to be honest, is, well, I just do this thing every single day and look at the results that I get, right? And no one shares the struggles or the fact that they're not as perfect as they seem. Everybody has a bad day every once in a while. So that's not what I mean, but you are motivated to take action on your own. How does this apply to me? Like if you see something, we're working on a project together, and you see something that needs to be done, you're not going to call a meeting and let's talk about it and try to get me to take care of it, right? You're going to bring your own energy source. You got your own batteries. You're going to, I don't have to pump you up and motivate you. So those are the 4 that I came up with.
I feel like those are pretty high standards. Not that that's wrong in this particular case, but knowing the people that at least I'm around a lot, like those are pretty high goals, which is, again, what you would want in the case of an inner circle.
Right. And then the other one I had was to connect with people. And this is a typical Mike Schmidt's action item. Very general, very vague.
Yep. We like vague ones. Yeah.
I do. However, it was successful. This one was what I needed to be thinking about this. And there are a couple things specifically with the day job that have happened in the last couple of weeks. Different, like we call them LMAs, management assessment sort of meetings, that this action item in the back of my head changed the way that I went into those meetings and produced a more authentic, heartfelt conversation, which translated into building more trust and better action items from those meetings. So I'm very glad that I did this one, even though it's hard to say I've completed it.
Nice. Well, that's probably a good place to jump into today's book, because as I think about, leading people and such, it means that really you have to lead yourself first, and you have to know where you're going, and you have to know why you're going there, which can bring us to today's book, which is Ikigai, which is a really fun word to say. I said the word Ikigai whenever my kids asked me what book I was reading, because they like to ask. And like, how do you say that? Ikigai. And now it's like one of their favorite words to say. It is a fun one. Not one that I would normally, I would not have said that that's how you pronounce it when I first saw it. So I'm very grateful that they have pronunciations in the descriptions for the book. But the subtitle on this is The Japanese Secret to a Long and Happy Life. This is by Héctor García and Francesc Miralles?
You're not going to get me to try to correct those pronunciations.
Héctor is what I'm going to go with as far as the author bank. This was originally written in 2017, I believe. 2016, and then it was translated into English. So it was originally written in Spanish about the Japanese and then translated to English. Just follow the language stuff with me there. So this has been around the language stuff. Basically, at a high level, the book is about a specific area in Japan called Okinawa, and they have an especially abnormal long life. Like they have a long lifespan expectancy in this area, and this book is about them and why that works and how they live, basically. And there's a lot to cover here. The premise, the word Ikigai, it refers to like this 4-circle Venn diagram, and they didn't really talk about the Venn diagram in the book, which is why I'm bringing it up now. I assume that's a link to it in the chat.
It's my hand-drawn one. I'm actually writing a newsletter about this currently.
Got it.
And the one that's in the book, I didn't really like. Well, it's black and white, kind of boring. So I made a color
I took
one.
a picture of the one on the back cover because that one's colored.
Yeah, true.
That's what I used, at least in my notes, but I don't have it in a way I can share it here right now. But take those 4 circles. One of those is what you love. The other is what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you are good at. And then that centerpiece, if you know how Venn diagrams work, that very centerpiece where all 4 of them cross, that's Ikigai. Basically, it's why you are on this earth. So that's kind of what they're getting into. I guess I'm jumping into the prologue here, or introduction, whatever you want to call it. But the bank of it is like, what is this word? What does it mean? And what do you do to figure out what that is for you? And what are the ramifications of figuring out what your own Ikigai is? I like saying it. It's a fun word. I'm probably going to say it a lot in this episode, and it's going to get annoying. My apologies ahead of time, but no apologies.
I like Carol's pronunciation, Ikigai.
I know, Ikigai, yeah.
Cool concept. You're right that I thought the whole book was going to be about this Venn diagram. It's not what we got at all.
Not at all, no.
But cool concept. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, so I kind of alluded to the prologue here, which is where they're talking about this word itself and kind of trying to demystify what it means. And I believe it's in here where they start like name dropping some things. One of the people that they name drop is none other than Viktor Frankl, which is pretty cool, and mentions his logotherapy, which we'll come back to here in a little bit. But they introduce us to the word Ikigai and trying to figure out what it is and how do you get it. And yet it's something that a lot of people have in Japan, and it's something that they hold on to quite a bit. But they don't really give you a solid definition of it at that point in the book, other than it's an interesting word, and here's how we met, and here's how we got to this book. That's really what the prologue is.
Yeah, I was surprised to see the Viktor Frankl stuff at the beginning also, although it makes total sense. I feel like they did a better job of advocating for Viktor Frankl's logotherapy than Viktor Frankl did when we read Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Totally fair.
And it's also come up in other places, and I felt like I had a better understanding, and it felt like a more important topic than it had any of the other times that it came up, which is why I say they did a great job of explaining it better than Viktor Frankl did, maybe. But yeah, so this is, I don't know, a complementary idea, a different version of this. It's not really like a competing idea to logotherapy, which is just the psychology made popular by Viktor Frankl to help people find their life purpose. And kind of the way that they do this is they went to Okinawa, where they have a high percentage of people who live to be 100 plus. What's the term they use for that? Super centurions or something like that?
Centenarians are people who have lived to be 100 or older. And then there's the term super centenarian, which is someone who has lived 110 or older.
Gotcha. Yeah, so they basically went and found all the people who were living a really long time and wanted to find out why. And that's kind of the Ikigai or Ikigai.
Ikigai. Yeah, well, let's just jump into chapter 1 here, because it basically is a continuation of that, which is titled Ikigai, the art of staying young while growing old. And they do mention here that, you know, they've got the Venn diagram in here. They mention that it's something that's hidden. Ikigai is something that's hidden inside each of us. It's interesting to me that they use the term hidden, as in like you have to find it. And I feel like that comes out a little bit later as well. But they also mention that in Japan, the concept of retirement is borderline non-existent, so much so that the word for retire as we know it in the English language doesn't exist in the Japanese language. I find that fascinating. And part of this is me coming from a farming background, because for a very long time, since I was very little, I've always like had this thing in the back of my head that like, well, farmers don't retire. They just quit. Like they're done. They die. Like that's all that happens. They work and work and work on the farm, and then one day they die. Like that's just how, like that's the culture that I grew up around, and many people followed that, and I've kind of seen that play out since I was little, and having that in the back of my head, I have said for a long time, like I'm probably one of those people who will never retire. Like I may quit working in a career, but I'm probably not going to say that I'm retiring. Like I'm just not one of those people. And this is vindication for me. Like this is an excuse to continue down that track. And I'm grateful that people who live a long time agree with me. So I will follow that pattern.
This is interesting because I realized, I didn't realize that at the time, but in the last episode, you remember I asked you if you had a life sentence?
And I said no.
Yeah. And now we're reading a book about finding your life sentence, essentially.
Yes. Yes. Because this was something that was on my mind. Okay. So like we're right after the New Year's, right? So everybody does their New Year's resolution, which are the best thing you could ever do in your life. And I've been like working through this, like, why is Joe on this planet? And so I was trying to find like some books around this, and I stumbled across this one. It's like, I don't know that this was exactly what I was after, but I know that it's like tangentially related to that in some form. So like, let's go for a shot. Let's do that. And then the life sentence thing came up in the book prior to that, which I was not aware was going to come up and hit me in the face. But here we are.
Yeah. It is kind of interesting though, because even though the book is titled Ikigai, it's really about living a long life, and that's one part of it. In fact, in this chapter, they talk about the 4 factors of a long life, which are diet, exercise, finding a purpose or Ikigai, and then strong social ties. And the format of the book is kind of interesting because they hit on all of those, and they hit on them again as they go throughout the book. But essentially, the book could be encapsulated in just this first chapter.
Yes. I don't know. And that was something that's in the back of my head. Like a couple things throughout this whole book that I was curious about from the very beginning. One is, if you read the table of contents, which we're going to work through all the chapters here, some of them much faster than the others, but the entire table of contents, just reading that would tell you that this is not entirely about this concept of Ikigai. Like, you can tell that just by the table of contents. So that's one thing that I was like, interesting. The other is there's a foundational assumption that a happy, well, I don't want to say happy per se, but that a long life is the end goal. Like that's the assumption here, that a happy and long life is your absolute end goal and the end all be all. Like that is what you should strive towards. There are people I know that would argue with that assumption. I don't really want to go into that in depth, but like that's something like, okay, that is the premise, and if you buy into that premise and that assumption, then this is the book 100%. But if you don't, you're kind of looking at this with a side eye. And I was maybe about a third of the way through it whenever that realization hit me. It's like, okay, now I'm kind of just wondering, like, yeah, okay, we can talk about how to live a happy and long life. It's not wrong, and doing these things is not wrong, but the assumption behind it all, I'm not sure I buy 100%. So I'm kind of giving it the side eye in that sense.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I gave it the side eye right at the beginning because they used passion inappropriately.
Oh, I didn't catch that. What was that?
Well, they have the Venn diagram, right? So the crossover of what you love and what you are good at, they say that's your passion. The crossover of what you're good at and what you get paid for is your profession. The crossover of what you can be paid for and what the world needs is your vocation. And the crossover of what the world needs and what you love is your mission. So go back to the passion one, what you love and what you are good at, right? So passion is not what you love. It is the exact opposite of that. The root word for passion is the Latin word pati, which literally means to suffer. So really, if I were to redo this, the what you love, I would say, what is important to you? And if you look at what is important to you, what you're good at, then I agree with passion. But this whole idea of like doing what you love, that kind of comes through in the end goal, right? The end goal for me is not to live a long life. It's to live a life of maximum meaning. But a lot of the people who are living to be 110 plus, they live in these small communities in rural Japan, it sounds like. There are other places that talk about these blue zones, and there's 5 specifically that they called out. One's Okinawa in Japan, that they visited, Sardinia, Italy. There's one in California, which is interesting, one in Costa Rica, and one in Greece, where they have a high percentage of people who live the longest. But all of them seem to be just happy living in their small little bubbles. And I'm not saying that is wrong, but that is definitely not for me. That's not how I view my concept is the life theme, right? That's my version of the sentence for your life. And I think Ikigai can kind of complement that. But right at the beginning, the what you love part, I took issue with that and kind of redefined it in my brain so that I could get through the rest.
This is why I like doing these episodes with you, Mike, because I just saw, Venn diagram, what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, what the world needs. Ikigai's in the middle. And I'm not even sure I read the words between the two specific pieces and what like the passion, profession, vocation, mission. Like, I don't even think I read those till just now. Like I just like, interesting diagram, and just kept going. But you caught it. Good job. See? This is why we do this.
Hey, thanks.
So yes, they talk about, like you called out, the blue zones. They talk about I don't even know how to say it, moai. It's like an informal group of people with common interests, and they like pay dues and stuff and have some benefits and such from that. But it ends up being like their close friend group and the people that they connect with the most. And then they also call out this 80% secret. Hara Hachi Bu is what they refer to it. Fill your belly to 80%. So basically, don't eat until you're full.
I love that.
I think it's so interesting. I made the funny story about this. I was talking about this particular concept to my wife over breakfast, I think, one morning. And, of course, my girls are there, and they heard that. Well, then that night for dinner, Becky made something that I was absolutely loving. And I didn't gorge myself on it, but I was definitely 100%, maybe 105% full after that. And I was like, I'm going to pay for that tomorrow for eating that much. And my oldest, Emma, is like, well, didn't you just say that you should only eat till you're 80% full? I was like, yes, but sometimes the food is really good. So I am not good at this one, despite me being small and, 100 pounds soaking wet. Like, this is not something I want to do.
This is an action item I wrote down.
You're going to do this?
That specifically. I overeat all the time, and I'm active enough and I run enough that I'm probably a little bit overweight, but I'm pretty fit. I mean, I run 20, 30 miles a week most weeks. I sprained my ankle about a month ago, so I'm ramping back up. Haven't done that lately, but so that's kind of my justification for eating a lot. However, the next book we're going to read, author introduces this concept of savoring, and that I had already read, and that triggered in my mind this specifically. So I tend to just eat, right? And this tastes good, so I'll just keep eating. But I don't really savor what I'm eating. And I think if you employ that idea of savoring, you eat a little bit more slowly. You are more aware of how full you are, and so it becomes easier to say, that is enough. That's the theory anyways. I'm definitely going to try to be more mindful about my eating. But the one that really I wanted to talk about here was the moai you mentioned. So in the moai, members make a set financial contribution to the group that allows them to participate. And then if there's money left over, they pay it back, basically. And this sounds a lot to me like a church, at least a functioning church. I realize that's my moai. Like that's how I realize the benefit of this. And it's kind of interesting because I think a lot of people view the religious community or any sort of church, like you hear the term church shopping, right? Or church hopping. You're trying to find the right one where it really clicks. All of the people that they talk about in this book were not surrounded by people who were just like them. They all did different things. They all had different trades. Like you wouldn't probably have chosen to settle down in this specific spot with this specific group of people, but this is who's there. And so you just learn to thrive in that community together. If everybody was exactly the same, the people that they interviewed in this book, I think they would have thought that was a little bit boring. But it occurred to me that that's typically how we look for these types of groups. We want people who are just like us. And the best version of this, I think, is not where you have a bunch of people who are just like you, but where you fit as a specific person in this collective whole, and you have a specific role. There's specific gifts that you contribute to that group that they are lacking. And likewise, they have things that you need. Sometimes you don't realize the things that you really need. You don't realize the need for wisdom from people who are older than you, who have seen some things, who have lived a totally different life than the way that you have lived it, right? We tend to focus on this person has achieved a goal that I want to achieve, and I want to do what they have done. So I'm going to go look for those people. But that is very limiting, and I feel this book has helped broaden my perspective and my appreciation for the diverse group of people who are part of the church community that I happen to be in. And if you know my story, the church that we're at, I'm not going to tell the whole thing here, but I said at one point, that is the last church I will ever set foot in. And that is where we are. That is where I am the men's ministry coordinator. My wife and I are elders at that church. Like, it's kind of crazy, but not the place I would have picked. That's my point.
It's one thing I've learned working in a church. Never, 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 never tell God that you will never do something.
True.
It's a terrible idea. All right, let's go on to the second chapter here, which is Anti-Aging Secrets, Little Things That Add Up to a Long and Happy Life. And they start this chapter with the concept of escape velocity, which is basically when technology can gain us 1 year of a lifespan every year. Like 1 year of life expectancy every year. Like I had to stop and think about this one, and it's like, okay. Like to be honest, like this is where things start to get like, to me, because I don't want to do that. Like I know that people have this thing where they think they can, like people genuinely believe that they can live forever, and they're trying to figure out how to expand their life expectancy with this escape of velocity, and I just can't. Like I don't want that. Like the time component is important to me. Like I don't know. I just think that that's a bad idea. But here we are, and people are doing this, and I get that it's a thing. But throughout this chapter, they set that up as like, here's what people are trying to do, and like if you want to expand your life expectancy and live a longer life, this is where they start to translate, okay, like the technology can get you there, but there are also these other components that help a lot as well. They mention like an active mind and a youthful body, which they'll talk about some of the exercise stuff a little bit later. And then they introduce the concept of stress and how stress can kill you. Basically, that's the concept. And they explain a lot about how stress works, what causes it, why do we have it, because of cave dwellers and such. Like there's a lot of the background that's there, and they kind of wrap it up with like a little bit of stress is good, but when we have things like email and social media expectations, like these things kind of put permanent stress on us, that's where your problem starts to step in. So they're advocating for getting away from that type of stress, but knowing that little bits of stress are also good.
Yeah. So the next book is going to speak a lot better to this than Ikigai did.
Yeah. I'm a little ways into that one, and I can already see that.
But yeah, you did a good job of summarizing this. There are two. One thing I did find helpful in this chapter is that the people who live the longest share two dispositional traits. One is a positive attitude. One is emotional awareness. And these are themes that come up a lot in Bookworm, I feel like we talk a lot about the whole concept of self-determination and personal responsibility and how that's actually a positive thing. And I think the easy, I say easy, like the one that people will grab without understanding the concept, argument to that is, so what am I supposed to do? Just pretend that nothing bad is happening in my life? And no, you're not supposed to pretend that nothing bad is happening in your life. You do recognize those things, but you can't stay there, right? And so the people who live the longest, the fact that they have a positive attitude doesn't mean that nothing bad ever happens to them. It means that they're able to move past that. They can endure the short periods of stress, but the body does wear down a lot faster during those periods of crisis. So you do generally want to avoid those. And the constant stress that you were talking about, that's definitely not good for us. And we should figure out ways to mitigate that, which again, we'll talk about in the next episode. But most health problems that we experience are in fact caused by stress. However, I think this whole idea of escape velocity is garbage. This is so weird to me. I don't even know how to address it. I can't even like put it into words. This just seems like common sense to me. No, you're not going to live forever. This is where, like, I have a hard time believing that the ancient Japanese, where Ikigai comes from, would believe this. This feels like the author's trying to blend something with a new idea. This feels like something CGP Grey would talk about, on Cortex. This does not feel like it belongs in a book on Ikigai. And I don't believe that this is going to happen, and I don't think it's worth spending any time trying to achieve this. I think we should try to be good stewards of what we've got. We should make the most of the resources we have available to us. We should not be upset when they eventually run out, because they are going to. This is not a race against the clock to try to solve the secret before the clock runs out.
I think this is the deviation point here, where, like you were saying, like the ancient Japanese probably would argue with the concept of trying to reach escape velocity. And I say that knowing that, having read the rest of this book and knowing the things and the culture and the lifestyles that they lead in order to have a long life, the long life is very likely just the byproduct of a culture that they have created, and not the seeking of a culture in life in order to develop a long life. Like, it's kind of become that somewhat. Like, they will regularly talk about how I'm going to live to be 120. And yet, like, that's just because there are so many super centenarians there. But I don't think that's the original purpose. Like, they have such a culture around doing things with intention and purpose and building community and having a healthy lifestyle. Like, that's such a big part of the culture in its entirety, that the idea of trying to live forever just would seem absurd to people who were developing that culture. So I don't see that as the intention of those in Okinawa, and yet that seems to be the intention behind the book. Like, how do I intentionally try to live, not necessarily live forever, but have a really long life? Like, that's the purpose, not the byproduct. And I would venture to say it's more of a byproduct for the people that they're studying. And I don't know that for certain, but that's my suspicion.
This reminds me, I had a conversation with somebody, and I'm blanking on who it was, when I was the host of the productivity show for Asian Efficiency. And they referenced most people's approach to productivity, and they tied it to a South Park episode, which, full disclosure, I have never seen a full South Park episode.
All right.
But I remember this story specifically where there's this underground race that is trying to take over the world, and they have a 3-step plan, but they can only ever get to step 2, because step 2 is collect more underpants. Well, why do we need to collect more underpants? Because we need to collect more underpants. So that's what I thought of when I heard this argument for living forever or living super long. Well, why do you want to do that? To live super long. Okay.
But
whatever.
Why?
Right. I couldn't ever really connect to that. And again, you go back to Ikigai, the initial Venn diagram, that makes a lot of sense to me. What the world needs. People are the reason for productivity, right? So I can get on board with that idea, but I do agree with you that we kind of lost sight of that as we went. And it's more so on just like, we should try to live for a really, really long time without ever questioning why we want to do that. Or I don't know, life isn't measured in length alone. I feel like you've got to have another qualitative measure that you use there, especially if you're going to talk about Ikigai, but that's kind of not, at least not what they're talking about here.
That's a good place to go on to chapter 3 here, which is from logotherapy to Ikigai. That he's going to go back to Viktor Frankl here, but I also want to point out that like some of this that you and I are talking about, like this is the foundational premise of the book of living a long life, and one of the two, right? And like that's what you and I do here. Like we've done this enough, and we've critiqued books long enough that we will sometimes just like, wait a second, is the entire premise of the book, which is assumed in most cases, even valid? Like let me back up here. Like we do that. I know that not everyone does. They'll just assume that the book is built on a good premise, and it's not always true. So just when you're reading books, pay attention to what the assumptions are, if you can locate them. Anyway, from logotherapy to Ikigai, how to live longer and better by finding your purpose. This is similar to what you're talking about. You know, whenever we're discussing the concept of Ikigai, why are you on this planet, and how do you find joy in that? This comes back to Viktor Frankl and like, how do you find the mission for your life, and where is your purpose and meaning in life? Obviously, we reference Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning being like one of the gold standards for how we find a 5-star book. And yet he's brought up here in his science of logotherapy being a big part of it. This is a pretty solid pitch, honestly, for logotherapy and like what it looks like to find meaning. I can't say that I fully caught how they go from logotherapy to Ikigai. Like I didn't catch that transition real well. At least I'm not placing it in memory, but I borderline just associated like logotherapy is Ikigai. Maybe you have a clean answer to this, but that's kind of how I landed on it. It's like, okay, here, these are kind of the same thing, just coming at it from different angles. But Viktor Frankl has a process that's summarized. They have I don't remember where this came from. This summer, maybe they put the summary together, but they've got a 5-step process of summarizing logotherapy that Viktor Frankl put together. Step 1 is a person feels empty, frustrated, or anxious. And I started thinking about that. I was like, okay, most issues can come back to one of those 3 things. Step 2 is the therapist shows him that what he is feeling is the desire to have a meaningful life. 3, the patient discovers his life's purpose at that particular point in time. I think that's an important disclaimer there. Step 4 is of his own free will, the patient decides to accept or reject that destiny. And step 5, this newfound passion for life helps him overcome obstacles and sorrows. And like, I feel like that's a pretty solid summarization of how logotherapy works. Now, when you go to translating that to Ikigai, like there's not really a process for discovering it, and yet it seems like it kind of lands in the same territory. Am I off base on that?
No. So Ikigai, all we really have for definition there is what the word means, and then the Venn diagram. In this chapter, we do have the 5 steps of logotherapy that he talks about. And then he gets into Morita therapy and Nikon meditation, which is basically other ways that you can find your life's purpose. So there's no like, here's the process for Ikigai in terms of discovering your life's purpose. But that is something that he says here, is that we don't create the meaning for our life, we discover it. I agree with that 100%. I think the issue I have here is not with this specific chapter. I think this chapter is pretty good in terms of discovering your life's purpose, finding out what you should be doing. The issue I think I have is in the interpretation of one of those circles with Ikigai, which is what the world needs. because all of the examples of the people living in the small communities who have lived to be 110 plus, I feel like those worlds are fairly small. And that's fine. There's a line to be walked there, I think, in terms of finding meaning in your day-to-day and going deep, not necessarily wide, having a large impact in the life of one person as opposed to just being an acquaintance to many different people. This is the problem with social media, by the way, is you've got 600 Facebook friends, but the average American only has 3 real friends. And a high percentage of them have no friends, true friends. So we have all these acquaintances and we call them friends. So there's a lot of value to be had, I think, in the model that they're talking about here. However, if you were to tell me, okay, I'm going to drop you in this tiny little town and you're going to live here for the rest of your life and you're going to have no contact with the outside world, because they had to like fly on a plane and then get in a car and drive past a bunch of forsaken land and then they finally found somebody. A lot of their excursions when they met people, like they detailed that in the book. Part of me is like, that'd be kind of cool to live out in the middle of nowhere, cabin in the woods. But then part of me right after that is like, I don't want to stay there. That's a nice retreat, but I feel you're diminishing the value of your life and the impact that you can have. Your legacy is tarnished in a way if you are just absolutely content with that. You should be questioning, is there something more for me to do? And I feel like that gets lost just in their interpretation of Ikigai. So all that to say, in this chapter, I feel the steps that they have and the different methods that they talk about are good tools that you can use to figure out your own individual life mission statement, life purpose, life theme, whatever you want to call it. However, I would just encourage everybody who's going to read this chapter specifically, but a larger picture, this book, to think a little bit bigger than the authors would kind of guide you to.
I think that's a valid point, because this can kind of pigeonhole you into a one specific way of getting there. And they give some examples of like a suicidal mother and a doctor who's frazzled. Like they give some of these stories and show like how they find their own purpose. I think that was through the concept of logotherapy in those particular cases. But the point, I think, from this whole section is like people have different ways of getting there and discovering this. And they will eventually end up landing on the last, part of the book, coming back to this, which I'll do when we get there. But I think it is important. Like this is kind of the one section where they're kind of giving you ways to find the answer here to what your own Ikigai would be. And yet there's no real clear path other than pay attention to what you like to do. Like that's a lot of what it comes to. But it also comes into, so like the next chapter here, chapter 4 is find flow in everything you do. Welcome back to the stage, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And let's go to flow. And that's what we're talking about. They introduced Mihaly, and they introduced like the process for achieving flow. There's Owen Schaefer in this book has like this whole thing. I forget where he was from, but he's got this 7-step thing of how to find flow, which is knowing what to do, knowing how to do it, knowing how well you are doing it, knowing where to go, where navigation is involved, perceiving significant challenges, perceiving significant skills, and being free from distractions. Like these are all, these requirements before you're going to be in this flow state where time seems to stop, right? And they bring this up because there really is a bit of a societal norm and elevation of people who work in the crafts, like these artisans in the Japanese culture. And that's really what they do all day, every day. Like that is their thing. Like they go to their craft and they focus hardcore on it like all day long. And part of me is like, that would be amazing. And part of me is like, I don't know if I could do that all day, every day. Like that seems like a lot. But if you have that strong of a connection, that's exactly what you would want. So that is they get into like how to do that on some smaller things as well, but it ends up becoming a very important part of the culture and the process, because being in that flow state is one of those things that can help you connect to your Ikigai, but also can help with the longevity piece.
Yeah, they have a definition for microflow in here, which is finding pleasure in the small, ordinary things, and I really like that definition. Again, though, that's not the goal, just to have fun and live a long time.
Right.
So take it in moderation, but I did find that useful, and I like the idea. They asked the question here: can someone really retire if he is passionate about what he does? And that kind of feeds into the whole concept of retirement not being a thing in Japan. I really like that. They talk about artisans, takumi, in this chapter, which this is what I want to do. I want to be a takumi. I want to. I don't even know exactly what the art's going to look like, but I've been thinking a lot about this over the last couple of weeks, about the things that I make. That's my art, and I want to become more excellent in it, not so I can sell more, but just so I can make better stuff that makes a bigger impact in people's lives. And if I'm able to do that, I can see where like I could be happy and fulfilled doing that for the rest of my life. And it's probably not going to be video courses in 40 years, right? But some way, shape, or form, that's what I would like to do. Now, when it comes to that in the day-to-day, the practical side for me, I've got a day job. So this is where all the practical advice about how technology is great if we're in control of it, but our generation suffers from an epidemic of multitasking comes in. And they do a really good job in this chapter, I feel like, of defining the dangers of this. They mentioned some of the same studies that you and I have heard 100 times, but they shared one statistic that I don't think I had ever heard before, at least not phrased this way, that working on several things at once decreases your productivity by more than 60% and your IQ by at least 10 points. That's a big reduction. So not only is it taking you longer, it's making you stupider. Stupider is not a word, I know, but I'll use it because it's fun to say.
It should be.
It should be. It should be. And then the other thing here is that rituals over goals. The happiness is in the doing, right? I really do think that's a great encapsulation of my issue with goals, where you get so focused on the outcome. And that's kind of the Western philosophy. You just got to achieve this goal. And once I do that, everything's going to click into place. My life is going to be so much better. And then you get there and really there's something else that you want. The goalposts seem to move. So there is value in finding your enjoyment of the process, just showing up and doing the thing, making the art. The whole idea of the artisan, that really resonates with me. When I picture an artisan, I get a picture in my mind of Bob Ross. My wife and I go to this sushi place that we really like, and they have on the TV in the bar, every single time we go, Bob Ross videos playing. And this guy is just so happy all the time. He's painting these pictures, these happy little trees, right? He loved what he did. He would have done that forever. Interestingly, like these are all videos that are, I don't know, from the 80s or something, but the way that he made them, he was like the first live streamer.
Totally. Yeah.
He's
Let's
the
make
OG
an entire
live streamer.
painting in 30 minutes. Let's do it.
Yep. Yeah, Euro Dreams of Sushi is that's referenced actually in this book. I'm familiar with that series, but I have not actually watched it. But yeah, like you can get a picture of somebody who just absolutely loves what they do, and you're like, I want to do that. Not painting specifically, but I find myself watching those Bob Ross videos. I'm like, I kind of want to paint.
Yep.
Right. So that's what I want. That's what I want to be when I grow up. Bob Ross for podcasts and video courses, I guess. I don't know.
I remember seeing a YouTube video. I believe this was a Japanese person too. They were ironing a shirt. You seen this? It's a white shirt. And they're ironing it with like this super hot iron. And the movements are meticulous. The folds are precise. and everything is choreographed in a very orderly manner. And I remember thinking that, like, and there's no music in the background. There's nothing. It's just real time. This man ironing this shirt. That's it. And all you hear is like the iron on the ironing board with the shirt. And it's like borderline like obsessive over the details of ironing this shirt. And I remember thinking, one, this man has way too much time on his hands to get this good at ironing a shirt. And two, I kind of want to be this good at ironing a shirt. Like that was like the dichotomy in my brain of like, yes, I don't think I could do this, but at the same time, I really want to do this. Like that concept of being in such flow in such a minor way and yet a major way, it's like in the realm of meditation, which they talk about in this chapter, and how like that can be an instant vacation if you learn how to do it well. And like, I get that, but like, I can see that. Like, if trying to get really good at even some of the mundane things can have some positive effects. Now, that said, the next chapter here, which is chapter 5, is about masters of longevity, words of wisdom from the longest living people in the world. And they have like some of the comments from these super centenarians that are 116, 117. I think the oldest that they had notes from was 122. It's like, what? Like, we're talking 40 years longer than people we consider old. Like, really? Okay. And they have some like wide-ranging thoughts on why they were able to live as long as they have. And some of it was like, I never eat meat. And like, I'm never stressed. I never worry. Like, these are all like grand things. And like, that's what they attribute to living a long life. But I think that comes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, there's a, like, inside these people that they're being interviewed, there's such a wide range of why they think they're able to live a long life that they're just not even aware of what it is that leads to that, which is why I think it's more cultural and societal than it is specific on that particular person. So yes, there's some words of wisdom here, but I think that's the point. Like, it's pretty wide ranging.
Yeah. So I don't like this chapter. I like the idea of this chapter. I think it is executed poorly. And the only reason I think that is because I have read 30 Lessons for Living by Dr. Karl Pillemer, I believe is the author's name. And that is the book that you should read if you like the concept of this chapter at all. Because this is specifically people just sharing, like you said, their tips for living to be as old as they were. But everybody is unique, and I think you can take a large sample size and maybe you can tease out some things. Like, certain percent of people said this, so there's probably some truth in that. But this is all just like a handful of stories, and this is what this one person said. And I tend to be skeptical of that advice. However, Karl Pillemer, what he did is he interviewed tens of thousands of people who have lived a successful life. And he defined success as he went into nursing homes and found people who had lived a long life. And when you go into a nursing home, most of the people there don't want to be there. However, there are always a couple who are just absolutely loving life, right? And so he went and he interviewed those people. Why are you so happy? What made you get to this point in your life and feel like you have lived a successful life? And I like that definition better than this Ikigai is kind of focusing on or anchoring on the length of the life, right? Not solely, but that's kind of the bias, especially in this chapter, right? So Dr. Karl Pillemer interviewed all of these thousands of people, and then he condensed it down into these 30 lessons. And you can apply those lessons in different ways, as opposed to, you should just never eat meat because look at these people in this town. A couple people told me that.
Right. And they have that, like, they almost have a disclaimer in here without saying it, because one of the folks that they have a bio on was 122 when she died. And She died of natural causes. She rode a bicycle until she turned 100. She lived on her own until she was 110, when she finally agreed to move into a nursing home after she accidentally started a small fire in her apartment. And she stopped smoking at 120.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Let
true.
that sink in for a second. Like, she stopped smoking 2 years before she died at 122.
Yep.
So I'm pretty sure that there would not be the argument for people to start smoking on a list of things you should do to live a long life. And
correct.
Yet,
now let me defend the authors here a little bit, because I like the fact that they just shared what these people said, right? They're not trying to condense down the handful of interviews that they did into these are the key concepts. Otherwise, they would have cut that part. But they published the entirety of the interview, right? They didn't cut out the inconvenient part. However, why add it then? Like, what is the value of these things if they're going to contradict some of the other things that you were talking about in the rest of the book? I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. One of my favorite things, so this person, Jean, that died at 122, on her 120th birthday, she said, "I see badly, I hear badly, and I feel bad, but everything's fine." Like, that was her her comment. It's like, I just got a kick out of it. It's like, yeah, okay, yep, I get it. Super fun. So these are kind of bios of those people. The next chapter here, which is chapter 6, which is lessons from Japan's centenarians. This is where they start to like summarize what they've learned from interviewing and seeing the lives of these people and what are the things that they do. And then they're going to start talking about the details of their lives here later. But they tell the story about arriving there and seeing like how they live in community and how it's a pretty big deal to celebrate, eat, drink together. They talk about birthday parties and some of the spiritual realm there, which was a little bit strange. It reminded me a lot of, from the United States, of course, like Native American spiritual culture, like spirits in nature. Like, it really reminded me of that. So having respect for nature in a broader sense. So like that seems to be a pretty big part of it. Then they have a series of lessons that have been learned from these, and there's 5 of these that they spell out. The first of which is don't worry. 2 is cultivate good habits, nurture your friendships every day, live an unhurried life. Didn't like to see that one. And be optimistic. And it's interesting to me that they're more mindsets than they are actions. If you caught that. Like, don't worry, cultivate good habits. Doesn't say what those should be, which they will talk about what their habits are a little bit in the upcoming chapters here. But nurture friendships, like, again, that's more mental than it is anything. Live an unhurried life, that's a mindset. Be optimistic, absolutely a mindset. So these are all revolving around mindset, which is awesome and frustrating at the same time, because it means that this is not outside the realm of what you could accomplish.
There's nothing in this list about setting SMART goals? Shocking.
There's not anything about goals at all, Mike.
I know.
Just
I like
habits.
Yeah, I like this list. I understand why it would be frustrating for people. I kind of didn't react that way, I guess. Maybe because I have work to do in some of these areas, but I recognize the value of them. The cultivate the good habits, it's probably the one I feel like I've made the most progress on so far, but I definitely could do better not worrying about things, living an unhurried life. I mentioned savoring previously. I have a feeling we're going to get more into that in the next episode. Being optimistic. I tend to think worst case scenario and have a contingency plan for everything. Nurturing your friendships every day. This is something that has come up over and over and over again as an action item for me. I don't have an action item from this book specifically. Like you said, a lot of these are just mindset things. I want to start to move my mindset in all of these different areas, but recognizing the importance of people, which as an introvert is uncomfortable, but is what it is. And I know that it's true. So I'm going to be looking for little ways that I can nurture my friendships. But that's also baked into my daily questions, going all the way back to triggers. That book, by the way, has made a profound impact on my life from that one simple thing about the daily questions. I had no idea when I set out to actually attempt that was going to have this big of an impact. But one of my daily questions is, did I do my best to be a good friend today? And I am going to continue to ask myself that question. I'm going to try to bump up that score and take consistent action on this.
Good job. Keep it up.
Will do.
So here's a look at what the Okinawans eat, which is kind of a summarization of what they're calling this Ikigai diet, even though it's not what it really is. So they eat a wide variety of foods, 18 different foods each day. I tried to find like what the typical American eats, like different types of food that the American would eat, and I don't know what the answer to that is. I know it's not 18 because I started thinking through like the number of different foods that I eat in a day, which is pretty wide ranging, and mine's like 9. Like, okay, they're doing a good job. So they eat at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. Grains are a foundation, especially rice. Almost no added sugar, and when they do have something with added sugar, it's cane sugar. They eat fish an average of 3 times a week. They eat much fewer calories because they eat till they're 80% full. They drink a lot of green tea, specifically sanpin cha, which is a mix of green tea and jasmine flowers. And they eat quite a bit of shikuwasa, which is like somewhere between a lime and a mandarin orange. So there you go. That's the miracle diet, if you would. But at the same time, my wife and I got into this conversation because I was explaining this to her. She's the cook in our family. And I think, because I know that there are people who live a long time who are in like Siberia and all they eat is fish all winter long. Like this stuff happens and they live a long life and they're not eating more than like 3 different foods in a week. So I know that that's not necessarily the end all be all. And I hesitate to say, like, here's the diet that every human should eat, because I can't help but think that genetics are involved in this on a pretty wide-ranging scale. Because, you know, if someone has strong German blood, like, your tendencies towards certain foods and the foods that you like are much different than someone who was born and raised in Hawaii. Like, they're just so far apart. And yet we want to have, like, here's the diet that every human should eat. Like that's what I struggle with. Like, I don't think it's that simple. I think it really depends on your background, like your genetic background, your DNA, and taking this diet and saying, I'm going to do that is not, I just don't see that as the answer to everything. I say that, and yet I'm quite certain that my genetics are not Japanese. And yet I've been taking on the action item of putting green tea into my morning breakfast routine, because they talk about the green tea and all the health benefits that come with that.
Nice.
So I have incorporated that. I've been drinking tea for breakfast for a long time now. I don't know that I've said that much publicly, but I have not been doing much for coffee. I do coffee once in a while still, but mostly I'm on the tea train at the moment. But I've been doing green tea instead of the black tea stuff.
All right. Well, you do have a garden, so
Yes.
You are able to eat the rainbow if you want to, I guess.
It's true. It's true.
One of the tips they give you here, but
that was one of the things from one of the chapters that we just came from, but they were talking about how, like, most of the people in these areas had their own gardens, and that's where they got most of their food. Like, yeah, we kind of fit that category. Though we were joking a lot at the end of the summer last year, because we had quite a few like boxed pizzas and stuff last summer. It's like, you know, I don't have time to cook a good meal because I'm busy growing my organic garden. So we have to eat these processed foods while I'm growing my organic garden. Like, that was the joke in our house.
That's funny. Yeah, we don't really have a garden. Rachel has a couple things that she grows out in the, the front of our house. We have a kind of weird lot though. It's kind of on a corner and there's no room in the backyard, but we do have some beds in the front. She grew some tomatoes and things there, cucumbers. And then my parents have a bigger garden that we help out with. So we do a little bit of this, but could definitely eat more fruits and veggies. That's kind of the thing they talk about, the eating the rainbow, having a bunch of different varieties of fruits and vegetables, not just the number of servings. I tend to agree with you. I don't like the specific recommendations for you should eat this and do this. However, I do have an action item here to try green tea as well. They talk about the, I forget how to pronounce it, harahachi-bu again. I mentioned earlier I've got an action item to kind of savor my food and stop eating when I'm at 80% full. They do also talk about fasting in this chapter. They mention that you should consume fewer calories overall, or you could fast 2 days per week, which they define fasting as consuming less than 500 calories. I'm actually pretty close to this already 1 day a week. So typically Wednesdays, I will fast all day and then I'll eat a meal after we get back from church. And it ends up being a little bit bigger meal because I like to eat. But if I practice my previous action item, I could probably keep that under 500 calories for the day. And I want to try to do that. I don't necessarily want to try to do a second day a week yet. I don't know. Like I do recognize that I could do this a little bit more. I actually have on my New Year calendar, I have like a habit tracker built in there, and I'm tracking a couple of things specifically: the days that I run, the days that I write, and the days that I fast. So I'm trying to write every day, run a couple times a week, and fast at least once a week. But I could see that increasing that frequency a little bit as the year goes on.
Now, kind of going alongside the diet realm, we need to talk about exercise. And this chapter was strange to me. Very strange. Basically, they talk about, the chapter's called Gentle Movements, Longer Life, exercises from the East that promote health and longevity. And, there's a number of specifics in this. Like they talk about Tai Chi, they talk about yoga, they talk about, Radio Thai? I don't remember all of them, but they have a whole bunch of these. And my best explanation is they're all yoga-esque. Like that's probably the cleanest way I can explain that. And I get it. I mean, that's kind of their form of exercise. Now, saying that, I've done yoga in the past. I've been doing a little bit since starting to read this book. Not every day, like a couple times a week in place of my other workouts. But regardless of all of that, and I don't really have strong opinions on types of exercises. I have such a smattering of things that I do that I'm absolutely the wrong person you should take advice from on types of exercises for different things. But they did call out a specific point in here that I thought was fascinating. They mentioned that metabolism slows down 90% after you've been sitting for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
That one kind of struck me that, okay, if your metabolism is dropping by 90% and all I've done is sit down for 30 minutes, that's pretty telling. So that would mean that for no more than 30 minutes, like if you get up after that period, like your metabolism then stays high. Like I've said this for a long time, I have a high metabolism. I know this. I just move a lot. And the days that I play basketball, like on Fridays, the whole Apple Watch thing will tell me that I've burned 1,300 to 1,400 calories at the end of the day. Like it's ridiculous what I go through. And the alarming part is I know a lot of people do this, even during the workday. As we're doing this, I've done that. We've been sitting here for almost an hour and a half now. So this is something that absolutely happens. And I can't help but think that there are huge ramifications just societally that this could be resolved if you just got up and walked around for a little bit. So I get it. At the same time, I don't know where I fit on all of the slower movement type exercises. I get why they're recommending it, but at the same time, I like to go run for an hour sometimes and play basketball. So I'm not going to do yoga on those days because basketball is more than enough that day.
Yeah, I like the idea of some of the different exercises that they shared here. I have to do stretches every morning for ever since I hurt myself the first half marathon that I ran. So the stretches help make sure that my muscles are in the right spot, but they also help with some of the sciatic nerve pain that I was experiencing. And I think a lot of like the yoga or the sun salutations is the one that I actually grabbed a picture of those different steps. And I want to try that. That seems like if I could actually do those movements, that would be very simple and very effective way to increase my flexibility and just get my body moving in the morning, kind of an extension of the stretches that I'm already doing. So I do want to try that. But yeah, I don't just the whole concept of yoga and tai chi and a lot of the things that they recommend in this book. Like I've tried yoga before and it hasn't really stuck. And I don't know what the reason is for some of this stuff. I do think it's interesting though. Like I'm with you. I'm not going to just do this. They basically say you don't need to exercise a ton. You just need to move a lot. And it's interesting to me that a lot of the hotness right now is like CrossFit or high intensity interval training, the 7-minute workout type stuff. That's not the same as CrossFit. I understand that, but that's like the people that I know in my life who are in CrossFit. That's kind of how they got there, is the high intensity interval training. That was the first step. And that's very contradictory to this. And I think that's probably just our Western culture wanting the quick fix, the high intensity. Let's get this over with and then move on to the other thing. Whereas the real general message of this chapter is just make it part of your lifestyle. Make it something that you do consistently that's healthier for you in the long run. I think there's some truth to that. And I'll be trying to move more, but you're not going to get me to commit to a specific yoga routine or anything like that.
Totally valid. All right, so chapter 9, last chapter before the epilogue. Resilience in wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi? Wabi-sabi. I'm going to go with wabi-sabi. How to face life's challenges without letting stress and worry age you. And this is where we start talking about emotional resilience. We get to learn about Anti-Fragile, which is super fun to see that book pop up and get a promo here. They mention Buddhism and Stoicism pretty heavily as well. Asking yourself the question, what's the worst thing that could happen? It's kind of coming back to like the Stoicism piece there with Seneca. And meditation comes up yet again, Mike.
Yet again.
You'd think that we would learn how to meditate one of these days, considering how much this stuff comes up, and yet I'm not doing it.
It's because you haven't moved to a tiny coastal town in Japan yet.
That's probably it. That's my next move. If I want to meditate every day, I need to move to a tiny town in Japan. That would solve the problem 100%.
This is interesting, though, because the whole idea of Anti-Fragile, getting stronger when you're harmed, he talks about the Hydra here. This is very much contradictory to the previous chapters where he talks about how we need to avoid stress completely. That's not exactly what they say, but that's the idea you're left with, right? Because chapter 2, most health problems are caused by stress. And here it's saying like, well, actually the stress can make you stronger if you have the right mindset. It just seems a little bit out of place, but I like the message of this chapter. I do like the whole concept of the anti-fragility. I do like the idea of resilience and grit, as Angela Duckworth would call it. I think actually they mentioned that in this particular chapter, but I'm not quite sure what to do with that. It feels like contradictory ideas here, and I had a little bit of trouble reconciling that in my head. I think I personally would lean towards don't wish it was easier, wish you were better, and focus on your growth and just try to become better and do better with everything that you have entrusted to you. But that's, again, a little bit contradictory to the live a long and happy life. That's probably just my mindset not coming from the same part of the world as theirs. I do think it was interesting in this chapter. You mentioned that every senior that they interviewed had a primary and a secondary occupation. Did you catch that?
Yeah. Basically building in redundancy.
Yeah. Redundancy. Yeah. So that's the how to be anti-fragile, right? Create redundancies, bet conservatively in certain areas, and take many small risks in others. Get rid of the things that make you fragile. But this specifically, when I read this, I thought of myself and I thought of you, because we both have day jobs and we have the stuff that we do on the side, right?
Yes.
So we have our primary occupations and we have our secondary occupations. And I like it that way.
Yeah, I'm totally a fan, because like I can go do my day job, and then when I go home, like I do a few things online, but most of the side stuff is like my wife runs the Acorn Ridge business, which she's starting to. So, you know how like I'm a big fan of the Leuchtturm notebooks. Like she's gotten into leather craft and making like custom leather things, and she's in the process of making me a leather cover for it that could then be reused for all the things. Like super nice. It would cost me so much money to buy one of these things. So anyway, she's doing stuff like that. That becomes a side business that the two of us share. There's all sorts of things. I fix instrument clusters out of vehicles. Like there's all sorts of stuff that just comes on the side. It's like little bits that add up to quite a bit by the end of the year. And I like having those different streams, because like if something ever happens in this one, well, then we'll just focus on this other one, and then we'll start to add in new things later. So like it's just less stressful overall to do it that way.
And more fun.
Oh, it's way more fun. Way more fun. Like that means we get to go record podcasts about books, and then I can go fix the network stuff that I screw up later on, and then I can go do some video stuff. Like it's just all sorts of places, and I like that.
I never really thought about the balance of like the day job and the side stuff in terms of anti-fragility before, but it does make sense to view it through that lens. And I also want to be careful here, because I don't think you can just prescribe, oh, everybody should have a side gig. But reading this kind of validated that idea in my head. I've mentioned before that there was a Derek Sivers essay that's really made this click for me. I'll put the link in the show notes for that. But it talked about having a well-paying job, and then you can let the art be the art. And when I read that, I was like, aha, that is the formula for Mike Schmitz, which is kind of different from a lot of the stuff that you see online. It's not necessarily bad, but people tend to gravitate towards the people who go indie, right? They can finally walk away from the side job and do the thing they've always wanted to do full time. I know some people who have done that. That's absolutely the right thing for them. And I found myself kind of aspiring to be like that. And that's the dangerous part, I think, is you got to figure out your own path. You can't just try to copy somebody else's. You can't do something the same way that they did. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive for that if that's really what you want to do. But just the fact that maybe your path is a little bit different than that doesn't prevent you from success in the side thing, the success in the art, the passion, if you will, right? Because it's not just what you love, it's what's really important to you. If it's really important to you, you're going to find a way to do it, whether or not it is the thing that can completely pay your bills. Going back to that definition of Ikigai, right? What you can be paid for, what you love, what the world needs, what you're good at. If it's really important to you, you'll find a way to do it before you can be paid for it, before you're good at it, before you identify that this is something that the world needs. And as you do it, you get better at it. There's a niche that opens up for you. And as you get better at it, people are willing to pay for the quality, right? These are all interconnected. So I think a lot of times with the side stuff, maybe it ends up being the Ikigai. Maybe it just becomes part of your passion or your mission. I'm trying to tie it back to this diagram, and it's falling down all over the place. But I hope you get what I'm saying here.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe a good way to wrap that is actually with the epilogue, because at the very end here, they basically just have a summarization of the whole thing. and a final note, which I alluded to earlier from Viktor Frankl, but they've got the 10 rules of Ikigai here. Number 1, stay active, don't retire. 2, take it slow. 3, don't fill your stomach. 4, surround yourself with good friends. Get in shape for your next birthday. Smile. Number 7, reconnect with nature. Give thanks. Live in the moment. Number 10, follow your Ikigai, which is a bit circular. 10 rules of Ikigai, follow your Ikigai. Like, okay. All right. And then they have, some like closing thoughts there, one of which is they mention like you need to stay busy doing what you love around people you love. And just from a Christian background, I was like, okay, that doesn't always 100% line up, but I get what they're saying. If you follow the premise of their, like the foundation of what they're getting at. And then the comment from Viktor Frankl is that if you don't know what your Ikigai is yet or what your mission in life is, that's your mission to discover it. Like that's your focal point, which I absolutely love that because it means that if you actually don't know what that mission is, that's your mission. Like that's where you need to go to work. And maybe this is where I'm at right now. At the same time, like reading through some of the bios and seeing some of the comments and how people, like what people's Ikigais are is interesting because it's not near as high level as you would typically think. Like when you and I talk about mission and life purpose and life theme and that concept, it's usually like my goal is to serve other people by helping them understand technology. Like it's something big and grand like that. Whereas most of the times whenever they were talking about an Ikigai, it was to be a good mom and grow a good garden. And that was as far as it went. It wasn't to have the best garden and to teach people how to garden and have the best lifestyle ever. Like that was completely off the radar. It was, I want to grow a garden and I want to be a good mom. Like, and that was the Ikigai. Like that was the focal point. And that struck me that like sometimes we have it, maybe this is the millennial thing, but like we want this big grand mission and we want this big life purpose, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that big right now. It might be at some point and you might grow into that, but in the short term, it doesn't have to be that large. So if you don't know what that is, like that becomes the goal in discovering what that is. So I just thought that was super interesting.
You want to be content, but you don't want to be complacent. That's the best way I can think to describe it.
Yep.
And that's my issue with it is I feel like there's a bit of complacency with some of the things that they described here, which just is not a fit for me. There's actually a really great quote that is not from this book that I came across by Phillips Brooks, who said that sad will be the day for every man when he becomes absolutely contented with the life he is living, with the thoughts that he is thinking, with the deeds that he is doing, when there is not forever beating at the doors of his soul some great desire to do something larger which he knows that he was meant and made to do. I feel like that is the mission, is to discover what that purpose is for each individual. And this is something that I am very passionate about. That is my life theme. My life theme is to help people answer the question, why am I here? By inspiring, encouraging, and teaching them to connect to their callings, discover their destinies, and live the lives they were created for. Like that is what gets me going. And I try to filter everything that I do through a connection to that life theme. And I feel like that's the takeaway from this is, like you said, at this point, if you don't have that, figure it out. And then once you have it, try to start living it as much as you can. Make sure that your values are in alignment with that. Your daily actions are in alignment with your values and therefore in alignment with your life theme. And it doesn't have to be written in stone. You can edit it and change it in the future. But that larger message, I 100% endorse.
All right. That brings us to the end of the book. Should we do action items?
Let's do it.
All right. I've got a couple here. I've talked about both of them already. One is doing the yoga bit. Which I actually started this morning. Did a sun salutation this morning, Mike. A few times, actually. And it was different. I'll say that. I'll have to report more next time because I'll do it a few more times before then. And then green tea over breakfast versus my typical black or herbal teas or an oolong. I've been trying to find a white tea, actually, to kind of go alongside this because they mentioned like it's even better than green tea, but it's expensive, so I don't want to buy it. There we go. So anyway, I've got those two. Very tactical in this particular case. How about you?
I have 4 action items from
Going
this.
big.
Sure. So one is the Harahachibu, fill your belly to 80%. Be more mindful of my eating. That's all the same action item, different ways of saying it. I have one that I've kind of already been taking action on, but the way that they frame this from chapter 4, no screens 1 hour after waking or 1 hour before going to bed. The exception to this, and really the justification for buying the Onyx books at the beginning, is that device. So no phones, no computers. However, I have intentionally anchored this device to only allow me to do certain things on it. That's kind of the beauty of having it in the role that it is. And I mentioned it's way too expensive for anyone to really justify getting it in the way that I'm using it. But there's a lot of value in that. I don't need to add all the other things on there. I can still do Spanish via Duolingo on the phone, and I can still take sketch notes via GoodNotes on the iPad. I'm not asking this to do that. And what it does is keep me focused on the journaling and the note taking. And it does that really, really well. But I've compartmentalized it to that specific thing, and it's way too expensive for that. So that's that one. And then also try green tea. I have heard a lot of people extol the virtues of green tea, and I feel like I've tried it at one point and didn't like it, but I'm going to try it again.
2 minutes.
And then
don't cross the 2-minute mark. That's the key. That's the key. Gets bitter if you go past that point.
Okay, good to know. And then the last one, I can't get myself to say try yoga. So I'm framing it as do more stretches, i.e. sun salutations.
Cheater. All right. So next time I'll ask you how your yoga's going.
Sure.
Oh, Mike. All right. As far as style and rating goes, the style of this, it feels very scattered to me. As far as the writing itself, they're pretty good, but it feels like it's all over the place. Now, I'm trying to keep in mind that this was a Spanish book written about the Japanese that was translated to English. So I'm trying to keep that in mind. So some of that is purely going to be in the translation. So I don't want to get too caught up on the technicals of like using this word versus that word, sentence length and such, because I know that that's somewhat flexible in a translation. That said, the overall structure is not up for judgment in the translation piece. So I know that like they bring back the Ikigai concept and try to discuss it throughout a number of these chapters, almost like they're trying to force that concept onto a diet or force it onto an exercise. But like Ikigai isn't those things. Like you're talking about the Okinawans in the Japanese culture. That would make sense when you're talking about the diet and the exercise. And Ikigai is part of their lifestyle. So like that fundamental concept of those two pieces are disconnected and yet tried to force together. It's like I don't like that they did it that way. And I wish they would have worked through that a little bit. It kind of feels like they landed on, this is a really fun word. Let's make it the title of our book. And then we're going to talk about this blue zone that we really love. Like it feels like that's just kind of how it happened. I don't know that that's it. That's just the way it feels. So I don't really like the way that they structured these components. That said, there's a lot of really cool stuff in here, and a lot of, like, we've pointed out a handful of facts now, studies that we've not heard of, stats that we've not noticed that are actually a fairly big deal. So I do appreciate that they did some research on that. Obviously, they went to this particular place and worked with these people, so absolutely love the concept of what they're doing. This is not what I was expecting based on the title and the subtitle of the book. Like, it just doesn't seem to line up 100%. So knowing that there's a lot of great things here and knowing that I am very grateful I've read it, I've already recommended it to a couple people with some reservations. But at the same time, like, what are you doing? Like, this doesn't, and I'm not even sure I buy your whole premise on under the foundation. So because I have like, I really like this and I don't know about this, like, I'm going to put it at a 4.0 just because, like, okay, just feels a bit weird. So I'm going to land at a 4.0 on this one, Mike.
All right. I agree with everything that you said about this. I was thinking of the other Japanese productivity concepts that I've been introduced to, like Kaizen.
Yeah.
And I don't remember reading a book of this length on Kaizen. So maybe just these concepts don't translate well into this format. And it does feel like there is a bunch of opinion added to this. And I like some of the attempts that the authors made to communicate their message, but it feels a little bit clumsy the way that it's put together. There are some chapters in here where I have a ton of notes, like the logotherapy to Ikigai. That whole chapter, I've got a whole bunch of stuff. And then there's like the chapter 5, Masters of Longevity, where I have 3 things I jotted down. There's things that just feel like they don't really belong here, but the core message in that Venn diagram, even though I have issues with some of the ways that it's put together, I feel like it is a very powerful idea. And you don't have to agree 100% with an idea for it to be powerful. So there are things that I would change with this. However, just the way that it was presented in this book, I feel like it's got me thinking about things in a different way. So that is 100% successful, and I'm glad that I've read it. There are other things that the authors presented in ways that we've read in different books, and we've heard some of this stuff 100 times, but the way that they phrased it really helped it click for me in a way that it didn't before, like the multitasking thing, for example, and some of the stuff around logotherapy. I mentioned at the beginning, I feel like they did a better job of extolling the virtues of logotherapy than Viktor Frankl did at the end of Man's Search for Meaning. So there's a lot to like about this. I don't think, towards the end of the book, I felt like it was getting a little bit long for me. And that's just a direction that the authors took. So recognize that. I feel like the real value of this is at the beginning, the first couple chapters, specifically 1 and 3. And 4 is also pretty good, where they get into the whole idea of flow in a little bit different way. Some really, really great sections in here, some sections I didn't really care for. Overall, I'm glad that I read it, and I think the idea of Ikigai is, to borrow Carol's term, is powerful, and I think it should be something that people consider. I think the whole idea of you're figuring out why you're here is a worthwhile pursuit. So I will join you at the 4.0. A little bit disappointed in how this one all came together, especially after a really strong start. But overall, I think it is a good book that people should consider adding to their libraries. I don't know if there's anything better out there that I would recommend. Just feels like this could be packaged into one of those blog posts, and you could get the 80% of the value and 20% of the words.
Yep. I get you. All right, let's shelf it. What's next? Next
is How to Calm Your Mind by Chris Bailey. And this is one that I got an advance copy for. It is... I almost gave away my view on the book before we started it, I think. I like it. Let's just say that. And it's going to be a good discussion. I think it's going to expound on some of the ideas that were presented in this one. And there's some stuff in there that moment I read it, I was like, I can't wait to talk to Joe about this.
Yeah, it'll be good. I'm maybe about a third of the way through it at the moment. So that'll be a fun conversation. I think I get what you're... Yep. I'm with you. All right. After that, I've selected a book called Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? This is by Dr. Julie Smith. She is a clinical psychologist, and her claim to fame is actually sharing psychology tips on TikTok. And I did not discover her there. I'm like rarely on TikTok at all. And I think I found her on Instagram. I don't know. Anyway, this book has a lot of praise to it, and it answers a lot of like difficult mental health questions. So I'm very interested to see, what is it that she's willing to share in the book. And I know that there's a lot of people that have said it's been very life-changing as far as their viewpoints and mindsets go. So I'm very curious to see what you think about it, Mike, and see what I think about it. So it'll be good.
All right. We will read a book by a TikTok doctor.
Yep, pretty much. How about a Gap book, Mike? What do you got?
Well, this book talked a little bit about Stoicism, and I don't really buy into the whole idea of Stoicism, but everything that I know about Stoicism, I have heard essentially from Ryan Holiday. And he references these meditations by Marcus Aurelius over and 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 over again. And I realized that I have only ever heard of these framed by Ryan Holiday. And I bought a copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I'm going to read the original source and see what he actually has to say. And I was a little bit nervous about this because I thought maybe this would be like a ginormous book and there was no way I'd be able to get through it. But I bought a specific copy that Ryan Holiday recommended before he made his premium $110 version. And it's like a modern translation of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Yep. And it's about the size of a normal bookworm book. So I'm going to try and get through that.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, I am still chipping away at Tribe of Mentors by Tim Ferriss. You may hear me bring that one up now and again as I'm, diving in and out of other books. But that one I kind of come to when I'm between things. So I've kind of been back in on that one here lately. So Tribe of Mentors, Tim Ferriss. Lots and lots and lots of book to cover in that particular one. So that all said, thank you to those of you who are Bookworm members and to those of you who join us on the live streams. It seems like we've had more and more folks doing that. So it's been super fun to see you guys in the chat. Thanks for joining us live. But we're also very grateful to those of you who help support the show financially through the Bookworm Club memberships. And if you would like to join those amazing members of the Bookworm community, you can go to bookworm.fm/membership. And that'll take you through the whole process. It's $5 a month, $60 a year, and you get access to all sorts of stuff that we talk about all the time. And some of those are Mike's MindNode files, some awesome wallpaper, just all sorts of cool stuff. So if you would be interested in joining that and helping us keep the lights on here at Bookworm, you can do that again at bookworm.fm/memberships.
All right. And if you are reading along with us, pick up How to Calm Your Mind by Chris Bailey, and we will talk to you in a couple of weeks.